My brothers and sisters in Christ, today's first reading contains one of the most controversial stories in all of the Old Testament, something that every reader can agree is something tremendous, but many disagree why. Why on so many levels? Why would God ask this? Why would Abraham do this? Why did this event happen at all? Of course, it comes into question of, can God ask someone to do something evil? That has been a source where some have debated. Immanuel Kant famously argued that Abraham should have immediately rejected that it wasn't the voice of God because it was something evil asked of him. Of course, we have to understand the context in which the scene even happens. This is a time not only of pre-Christianity, but even a Jewish understanding of the world. Abraham thus far has responded with faith to everything God has asked him to do. God has made covenant with him, and Abraham has at every step moved. Ishmael was born to him, and Abraham, in a sense, was already asked to entrust to God a son. When Ishmael and Hagar were sent away, God promised that he would provide for him. And now it culminates in this famous scene where Abraham is asked to sacrifice the miraculous son, the son he should have never been able to have in the first place, the son conceived long after Abraham and Sarah were past the age of fertility. And yet, finally, he has the beloved son, and now God asks him to journey and to sacrifice him. And Abraham, in the account, responds with the fullness of assent of faith. But what's lost in this, we know that it's a powerful precursor of the sacrifice of Jesus himself. That what God spares Abraham from doing, of course, as the story says, God does not allow Abraham to go through with the slaying of Isaac. Instead wants to see, will Abraham assent to what he asks of him? When he sees that Abraham has put all of his trust in God, he of course spares Isaac, and instead another offering is made. Abraham says, when Isaac asks, where's the sacrifice? Abraham rightfully says, God himself will provide the sacrifice. This is a foreshadowing to God providing his only son to be the one that would be offered up, the lamb without blemish. And so for this reason, we know this is one of the readings that can be heard at the Easter Vigil every year as a precursor for the sacrifice of Jesus. But what a lot don't know is how much the cult of priesthood for God is built up from the beginning of Genesis all the way until Jesus, when it culminates with Jesus, the eternal high priest. Priesthood is built in from the time of Adam and his stewardship, through his children, through Noah, to Abraham, down through his sons, then to Moses and Aaron, through the priesthood of the firstborn, through the Levites, and through the Davidic line, and so on all the way to Jesus. There's a tradition of priesthood, of those who offer to God, being built up. And what's incredible in this episode that many don't know is the location of Mount Moriah, the place where Abraham is told to go sacrifice Isaac. They travel this way to Mount Moriah, a word that you don't hear later in the scriptures. But for those who know the accounts of the books of Chronicles, Mount Moriah is the very place where the temple would become built. In fact, Mount Moriah is Jerusalem. Some have even studied trying to see if it can be equated with Golgotha itself, to Mount Calvary. If not the same, they're at least proximate to each other. But the very place where Abraham is asked to sacrifice Isaac, and of course doesn't, but this altar is built and the offering made to God, Abraham held nothing back, and Isaac is spared. Later is the very place where David is revealed to build an altar, to build sacrifice, to end a time of suffering, and where Solomon builds the temple itself, the place where sacrifice to God would be continued, and of course culminated in the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross, when the veil of the curtain is torn, and there on Calvary, the perfect sacrifice by the perfect priest is made. In fact, all of salvation history is God revealing to us how to be a priestly people, what true love looks like, and what true stewardship looks like. That everything we have is given to us by God, and all we must be prepared to offer back to him. What does God ask for us? The totality of sacrifice of ourself to him. Does this mean violence and bloody, suffering? Not necessarily. but it does mean that we entrust all, that we see our very lives as gift to God, and that the God who promises, as he did Abraham, to work everything for his good, is constantly working for our good, and asks us in turn to put our trust in him and be ready to offer everything back. May God bless you all.